The last voicemail. David sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, scrolling mindlessly through old messages on his phone. It had been 3 months since his mother, Eleanor, passed away. Her sudden departure left an unbearable silence in his life. His father had passed years ago, and now he was truly alone. One night, out of nostalgia, he decided to listen to her old voicemails. There was comfort in hearing her voice again, soft yet firm, full of warmth and love. But then, as he was about to put his phone down, a new voicemail notification appeared. Unknown number, received at 2:17 a.m. David's heart pounded. He hesitated before pressing play. The voice on the other end sent a chill through his spine. "David, don't let him in." The voice was unmistakable. It was his mother's. His skin crawled as he checked the timestamp. The message had been received just minutes ago. How was that possible? Her phone had been disconnected. The very thought of someone using her number sent waves of unease through him. A sharp knock at the door made him jump. Thud, thud, thud. His breath hitched. He checked the time, 2:19 a.m. His mind raced. Was this just a cruel prank, some coincidence? His mother's words echoed in his head. "Don't let him in." David approached the door cautiously. Through the peephole, he saw nothing but darkness. No figure, no shadow. The hallway was eerily silent. Thud, thud, thud. The knocking came again, louder this time. His hands trembled as he backed away from the door. His phone buzzed. Another voicemail. Unknown number, received at 2:20 a.m. He played it, heart hammering in his chest. "David, whatever you do, don't open the door." Terror gripped him. He turned off the lights and backed into a corner. The knocking continued, each strike heavier than the last. Then the doorknob began to turn, slowly, deliberately. David's breathing grew shallow. He clenched his fists, debating whether to call the police. But what would he say? That his dead mother left him warnings from beyond the grave. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the knocking stopped. Silence. David waited, straining his ears for any sign of movement. Minutes passed. Finally, he gathered enough courage to check the peephole again. This time, there was something there. A man stood inches from the door. His face was pale, his eyes hollow and lifeless. But the most horrifying part was his mouth. It was unnaturally wide, stretching into a grotesque grin. His lips moved, but no sound came out. David stumbled backward, a choked scream caught in his throat. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number, received at 2:25 a.m. He barely managed to press play with his shaking hands. "David, I love you. I'm sorry." Tears welled in his eyes. His mother's voice was fading, barely above a whisper. A heavy weight settled in his chest. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Then the lights flickered. The television turned on by itself, static filling the room. David whipped around, his pulse hammering in his ears. The screen shifted, revealing a grainy image. A hallway. His hallway. The camera angle moved slowly, creeping toward his door. His phone slipped from his grasp. The television screen flickered again. The camera had reached his door. The distorted figure stood there, grinning. But this time, he wasn't outside. He was inside the apartment. David spun around, but there was nothing behind him. The television cut to black. His phone buzzed one last time. A single message appeared on the screen. "It's too late." David's chest tightened. His mind screamed at him to move, to do something. But his body remained frozen in place. The air in the apartment had shifted. He could feel it. A weight, an oppressive presence, loomed behind him. Slowly he turned his head, his breath caught in his throat. Nothing. The room was empty, yet the sense of being watched was overwhelming. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number, received at 2:27 a.m. He didn't want to look. He knew he shouldn't. But his trembling fingers disobeyed, tapping the screen. A photo. It was his living room, the very room he was standing in, but there was someone, standing in the shadows by the window. A tall figure, impossibly thin, its head tilted unnaturally to the side. The grin was still there, stretching wider than before. The lights flickered again, plunging the apartment into darkness for a split second. When they came back, the air was colder. Thud. The sound came from inside the apartment. David's breathing grew ragged. He grabbed the closest thing he could find, a lamp, and clutched it like a weapon. He forced himself to move toward the window. The curtains fluttered slightly, as if disturbed by an unseen force. His phone buzzed once more. Unknown number received at 2:30 a.m. This time he didn't check it. He couldn't. He needed to get out. He took slow, measured steps toward the door, willing himself not to look around. Every instinct told him that if he turned, if he acknowledged the presence he felt, something terrible would happen. His hand reached the doorknob. The lights went out. Total darkness. A breath, right behind him. Cold fingers grazed his shoulder. David screamed. In a blind panic, he wrenched the door open and stumbled into the hallway, his heart slamming against his ribs. He ran, not looking back, not stopping until he reached the stairwell. He took the steps, two at a time, nearly tripping in his desperation to escape. When he finally reached the lobby, the fluorescent lights seemed too bright, too normal. The night clerk looked up, startled. "Sir, are you okay?" the man asked. David panted, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. Did anyone come in?" The clerk frowned. "No one. Just you." David's phone buzzed again. Dread curled in his stomach as he raised it to his ear, his hand trembling. "David, run." The voice was no longer his mother's. It was something else, something wrong. The lobby lights flickered. The air grew heavy again, and then the clerk's face twisted into an unnatural grin.